This is a Renew original recording. Hello and welcome to Believe in People, a British podcast award-winning series about all things addiction, recovery and stigma. My name is Matthew Butler and I'm your host, or as I like to say, your facilitator. Today's guest is Krista Banks, the founder of Not Saints, the UK's only not-for-profit record label dedicated to supporting those seeking a life free from drug and alcohol addiction. But Not Saints is more than just a music organisation. It represents a compassionate approach to supporting individuals navigating recovery from substance misuse. Born from personal experience with addiction, Not Saints understands the complex challenges of rebuilding a life and finding connection. Since 2019, it has created a unique space where music and recovery intersect, offering creative opportunities that go beyond traditional support models. It provides a platform for artists in recovery to rediscover their potential, challenge stigma, and build a future where music is a tool for healing rather than harm. I begin our conversation by taking it back to the influences that shaped Chris's relationship with drugs and alcohol and how the music scene of the 90s played a role in his journey into addiction.
I grew up in the 90s, the early 90s, and it was kind of, as a young, impressionable teenager, kind of drink and drugs were everywhere. You had the Gallaghers in the papers, their notorious cocaine problems and TFI Friday on a Friday night, and you turn on the TV and there's Chris Evans with a pint in front of him and Sean Ryder, and stuff like that. So it was kind of as a teenager growing up in that kind of in that world essentially, or seeing all that around you, it was kind of an inevitable thing, I think, really, to kind of start trying out those different things. So drinking alcohol and drugs, and also at the same time getting into music and starting to play in bands and picking up a guitar for the very first time and stuff. So I think that kind of 90s melting pot of music and culture and everything was the real kind of birth point for my later problems with alcohol and drugs. And so I started drinking and started smoking a bit of weed, as most people do in their kind of early to mid-teens, and then things progressed as I got older. So then the party drugs came in, so ecstasy and speed, and kind of fast forward into my 20s, then it's coke, and things got harder, and the drinking got harder as well. And being in music and working in music and playing in bands, it was kind of it was a really great place to kind of hide an emerging drug and alcohol problem, because everybody around you's partying all the time. You do a gig, everybody's drinking afterwards, you're going back to house parties, you go off on tour, everybody's drinking to sleep or smoking weed, and it's kind of so it just became a kind of a part of the lifestyle, really. And then as I kind of came towards the end of my 20s, the cracks really started to show. I was getting in trouble with the police. I was falling out with friends. I was getting into financial difficulties. I was losing jobs, and I thought, I need to do something with my life. I need to make a radical decision. So I decided to go to university. And thought, if I give up, drugs are the problem. If I give up drugs, everything will be fine. I can still drink. I can just go and be a student for 3 years and turn my life around. So I went and studied music business.
I just want to say the irony there of going to university to sort those things out.
When
For so many people, that can be where it starts, so that's the time in where they do it.
This is it. I
love the irony of that there. Yeah.
I know, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to that kind of like, oh, this is the problem, so I'll do something equally insane to fix it. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's, but I went to university, studied music business. Thought that I was going to be okay, but obviously once I put down the drugs, the drink really started to take hold, and what was a kind of an evenings and weekends thing really started becoming a daily battle. And somehow managed to get through my degree. The drugs did come back in, because I found that then I was needing to use drugs to kind of manage my drinking a little bit more. And obviously if I was taking something like MDMA, then I couldn't drink as much. And so it became this kind of constant self-medication battle of trying to just eke my way through this degree. And basically when I finished that, had all these kind of pie in the sky ideas about going off and working in London and having an expense account and getting a flash car and working for Sony and all this. And of course, none of it came to fruition. And gradually, my addiction in that final kind of, 4 or 5 years after my degree really just stripped everything away, to the point where I was, penniless, destitute, unemployed, living in one room above a pub, ironically, because it was the only place I could find that would let me live there, and then came the crashing rock bottom. But, with that rock bottom became the kind of the catalyst then for this next phase of my life, which was, to take everything I'd learned in music and everything I'd done in the music industry and actually turn it almost 360 and go, right, hang on, let's use this as a power for good now, rather than a kind of a self-aggrandizing journey of trying to be something, being the next Simon Cowell. Not that I ever wanted to be Simon Cowell, but
someone can relate.
Someone was a frame of reference.
I think, do you know, the correlation between drugs, music, creativity, thinking of artists like Eric Clapton, for instance, they're so deeply intertwined. How did you find using substances with your creativity? Did it help your creativity? Was it a hindrance to it? How did those two things play off each other?
I think there's a huge myth. I think this is the thing amongst creatives. I think it's the myth. It's like, if I use drink and drugs, I'll be more creative. Therefore, I will make, my magnum opus will come when I'm off my head, and I'm uplifted to a spiritual plane where I'll write this incredible piece of music that everybody will fall in love with. They'll think I'm a genius, and that'll be the rest of my life. And I do a lot of work with music colleges, and you hear it all the time. It's like, oh, but I need to be tortured. I need to be this. I need to be, it's like, no, try writing as your authentic self. Write from your own experiences. Like, the best way to experience anything is with a clear head and a clear mind, because then your emotions are pure. Your understanding of a situation is pure. You're experiencing it in a non-substance affected way, and then you can write from it with authenticity. So this kind of misnomer about being the tortured artist, like everyone's like, oh, but Jimi Hendrix took loads of drugs and he was the best guitarist in the world. It's like, yes, and he died. Kurt Cobain committed suicide because he took too many drugs. Where would those artists be today if they hadn't been on drugs? If they had just done what Eric Clapton did, which is get sober, and go on and have a long and illustrious career, making incredible music and having a long and beautiful life. And it's that thing, isn't it? And it's a huge myth that I kind of bang a very small drum, big drum. I was going to say try and bang a big drum, but not a lot of people listen. But it's trying to just dispel those myths. And I've shared it a lot in music colleges. I think it's actually in print as well. I did it for a book for Music Australia. I did a bit about dispelling that myth. And it's like, I think anybody that challenges what I'm saying, it's like, I would just say to them, take 6 months off. Take 6 months off drinking and using drugs, and go and be and just work out, who you are as a musician again. Try meditation as a form of kind of channeling your creativity, and then if that works, great. But I guarantee you, I'm right. Like just go and try it. What have you got to lose? The drink and drugs will still be there. Your guitar will still be there. Your notebook will still be there. Your paintbrushes will still be there. Just go and try it for 6 months. If it doesn't work, go back. Yeah.
No, wonderfully put, to be fair. I think another thing that you mentioned then was about those influences. You mentioned the Gallaghers and stuff. I guess those cultural influences as well. Like, what's your opinion on obviously how it affected you, but how it still continues to affect young and impressionable people now with the way that drugs and alcohol is glamorized in the media and within music?
I think it's a really interesting thing, because there's kind of several different strands to this. I mean, there was a thing came out on social media a few weeks ago, and it was I think it was from an alcohol study, which basically said that young people are drinking less than any of the previous generations. But we know in services and things like that, and from conversations, is that the fact is that the drug use is higher than it's ever been amongst young people.
Ketamine is ridiculous amongst young people.
The current ketamine epidemic is absolutely astronomical. So, on the one hand, you've got young people who are going, yeah, I don't drink. It's like, yeah, but you're banging loads of horse tranquilizer up your nose every Friday night, and your bladder's failing. So it's a kind of a very strange thing. I think the cultural references, I think, have shifted. I mean, obviously when I was growing up, it was still sort of music magazines like NME and Melody Maker and the chart show on a Saturday morning and TFI Friday and stuff like that, and it was all still very much mainstream media. Whereas I think with social media and kind of how that's taken off, and things like TikTok and kind of how artists can present themselves, and how culturally conversations can happen without necessarily mass media behind it. I think it's created lots of different pocket cultures, and like we say, things like ketamine that probably no one was really interested in, back in the early 90s, whether it was even a thing then. I guess it must have been, but certainly I never came across it, because you were then kind of like going, oh, my heroes are doing this, so I'll go and do that, rather than social media kind of feeding into this cultural thing, these subcultures. So but I think it's still very poignant. I mean, alcohol companies are still targeting women, predominantly through their campaigns at the moment. I mean, the Prosecco culture is, mums and Proseccos, mum happy hours from 3 o'clock in your local pub until 5 o'clock, after you pick the kids up
even
from
the
school.
colourings, like the pink gins and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
It couldn't be any more target. It makes it sound like it'd be much more appealing as well by giving it a nice feminine colour to it.
This is it, and it's just so I think culturally, it's still there's still some issues there, and there's still a lot going on, but definitely the kind of current focus on school run mums and bottles of Prosecco is quite a shocking thing, really, when you actually boil it down.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm just thinking about, for you, there was cultural influences. Now I've spoken to many people on this podcast that often talk about their upbringing, talk about their relationships with their parents, talking about childhood trauma as often the gateway into drug addiction and substance misuse. And I think that's always an interesting conversation when people mention cannabis being a gateway drug. You mentioned cannabis use yourself. But actually saying there is no gateway drug, the gateway is often trauma. I'm not saying that's your story by any means, but thinking about when substances was introduced to you and the age you was, what was the impact that had on, I guess, your family? What did they think to it? Was they aware of it? Was there any self-blaming from themselves as well when you'd turned into the person that you was turned into through substance use? Yeah,
I mean, that's a really interesting question, because I don't know. It was never really spoken about, and I think that's the thing. It's just coming back to your earlier point around kind of, the upbringing and stuff like that. I mean, I have talked in previous interviews about the fact that, my dad worked in a community centre bar and my granddad was a builder. And whenever we went and saw him, it was always in the pub. But, it was the 80s then. That was of a time. So for me, I was born in 1980. So growing up, 1985, 1986, going to see your granddad in a pub and getting a Coke and a bag of crisps in the beer garden and go and play while dad has a beer with granddad and stuff. That was just of that time. So you can't really, I don't really pinpoint that as a kind of I was surrounded by it, so therefore it was inevitable it was going to happen, because that was just a period of time in society. So I think it may have contributed. It may have given me my young impressionable brain a little glamorization of like, oh, grown-ups spend all their time in the pub. Maybe that's what I should be doing when I grow up. But maybe not. Who knows? But for me, I mean, I think it's that kind of cultural wraparound that you're a product as much of your environment, but wider culture and society as well. So I
think that's one of the things that is very prevalent in these conversations that we do have, is that product of the environment. And yes, sometimes people are introduced to those environments at a much earlier age and are maybe subjected to some form of childhood trauma. But I've often talked about my daughter on this podcast and how I'm so conscious about I have to get this right. And it doesn't matter how much reading around parenting that I do, there is that element of once she starts to make friends, starts to, go to school and starts to have pop culture influences and friend influences, she'll become the product of a different environment, which is something that I can't control. Yeah. And I guess that's kind of a similar situation to yourself. It wouldn't have mattered what your parents did or what environments they kept you from. Once you was in that circle of friends and had that pop culture influence, that media influence, and those interests in music and that environment, that is what's going to influence what comes after that.
Absolutely. So I've actually got a little boy myself. Okay. So and God, I love him so much, but. I know what boys are like. I've been a little boy at one point, and I've known how you will just rebel against anything. If someone tells you to rebel against rebelling, you'll rebel. And it's that thing. And I was in a meeting the other day, and someone said to me, "Oh, aren't you worried that given that he's that you're an alcoholic and a drug addict, and that he might go down that route?" And I said, "But who better to carry him through that journey than his dad, who's been through that himself?" I said, my biggest fear is that he goes through something that I've got no experience of. Yeah. Because then how do I help? Then I have to turn to books and kind of and professionals and then go, help me, I need to know what to do here. But drinking drugs, fuck me, I've got 20 years experience of that stuff. I can coach him on that all day long. You know what I mean?
It's an interesting point that then, because there's something that we've talked about before. It's the idea of alcoholism being a disease it being hereditary, something that people inherit from their parents. Is that a concern for you? That addiction gene is in him? If that is a thing, if that is a thing, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what your opinion is on all of that stuff. Some people seem to think, because my dad was an alcoholic. See, for me, it goes back to the environment. I don't necessarily believe that just because your parents were, alcohol dependent, drug dependent, that you are going to become alcohol or drug dependent yourself. I think it's that environment in which you grow up in, which is what we've just been talking about now. People can argue that completely. Yeah. And that's absolutely fine. And for me, it's all about learning. I'm here to listen to those environments. And, my opinion could be changed. So I guess going back to it, what is your opinion on that then?
I suppose the genetic argument is always there. I don't know. I think it's such a variety of things. I think that's the thing. I think, yes, if you're from a family of addicts, then your predisposition is probably there. But that's, again, it's a conditioning thing. It's more like my son, I gave up drinking. I got sober. I came into recovery. I went through treatment. I did all of that before he was born. And he's now 4 years old. He's never seen me with a drink in my hand. He's never seen me use a drug. I gave up smoking a month ago, after a love affair of 30 years with cigarettes. I gave up, so he hopefully he won't ever remember me smoking. So, will he then, would that mean that he is going to drink and use drugs? I don't know necessarily. So maybe if there is a genetic argument that he might be predisposed to that. But I think there are so many different elements that create the perfect storm for an addict. And I think it's your upbringing, it's your environment, it's culture, it's everything around you. It's even down to things like financial privilege. Absolutely, like, if you come from a deprived area and there's nothing to do and you haven't got the money to do anything and someone offers you a bag, you're going to go with that because it's something to do. Do you know what I mean? Rather than sort of, if you're from a wealthy family and you're brought up well and you can go to the cinema with your mates whenever you want or whatever, it creates different opportunities. So therefore, the predilection to kind of go down the drink and drugs route, even if you have got that gene, you may not because you've got other
and that's what I'm saying. That would be my argument. Just the idea that because a parent is alcohol dependent, drug dependent, that the child is going to experience that. Like, that is the only factor. I think it's complete bollocks. I think it is exactly as you said. It's all those other things that surround it. Of course, like you said, it can contribute to that. But I think there's so much more to look into than just completely. Dad's an alcoholic, mum's an alcoholic, I'm going to be an alcoholic.
Well, this is it, yeah. I mean, it comes back to my own experience again. So my mum's not an alcoholic, my dad's not an alcoholic. I've got two sisters, neither of them are alcoholic. And I went down that path for whatever reason, for whatever created that perfect storm for me to kind of go, I'm going to embrace this with all my being and kind of, and I'm going to walk this journey, however that transpired. I think the kind of argument for it being just a genetic thing, I think is complete bullshit.
Would you share your story with your son when he's older, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes some people are so inclined to keep a lot, because of the shame, because of the stigma, keep a lot of that stuff to themselves if they could. But I think there's learning in that as well, really, to share that. As exactly what we're doing now. Yeah, by sharing those stories. So I thought I'd be...
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, I have never shied away from telling my story. I'm not ashamed of my addiction. I know for a lot of people there is a lot of guilt and shame, and pride and ego takes a huge kick when you kind of sit there and you go, I'm an alcoholic, or I have a problematic relationship with alcohol, or however you frame it. Like, I know that there's a lot of guilt and shame to be carried in that. But the thing is what we can do to alleviate that guilt and shame is things like this, sharing our story, educating, reducing stigma, raising awareness, and whether that's with a family member, with my son, whether with a wider audience on an award-winning podcast, or, standing in front of a room full of people in a fellowship meeting, I can share my story, and if it helps people, the little bits of that guilt and shame just get chipped away, and that's the thing, isn't it? And we can turn such crushing negatives into such positives, I think is a beautiful thing. It's a gift that every addict and alcoholic has. You just need to embrace it.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit before the podcast started about war stories. You mentioned rock bottom moment. can you share some of the realities of what addiction was like for you? Some of the worst moments that you experienced during addiction? Not to glamorise it, but just to give the reality of what it is like for an individual.
Yeah, I was the type of addict of more, always more of everything. Like, you know, if I started drinking, I was drinking to blackout. If I was using drugs, I was using drugs until they were either all gone or I was getting some more, or I was literally just dying on the floor. You know, I remember one New Year's basically starting probably sometime just after Christmas and using drugs consistently till the point on New Year's Day where I thought I was going through kidney failure. I was literally, I could barely move laying on the floor. You know, but I'd have rock bottoms of waking up in police cells. God knows how many times I woke up in police cells. I actually left cold. I lived in Essex for about 8 years, and by the time I left there, I think I had about 10 or 11 cautions for various different public disorder offences. And they were like, you know, next time we arrest you, you're going up in front of a magistrate, regardless of what it's for, because you need to be taken out of society. I was like, okay, I need to get out of here. You know, but I do. And then physical things as well. Like, you know, I'd wake up in the morning with like my face stuck to a pillow, and it'd be like my eyebrow would be just completely exploded mess of blood, and you know, no recollection of how I'd done it, you know, and I'd just get up, wash it off, laugh it off, and go straight down the pub or go and get a can or whatever. And I fell down a set of metal fire escapes once and cracked 4 ribs, like broke 4 ribs, and woke up the next morning and was kind of like, oh my God. And, you know, was laying in bed all that day, didn't go to hospital, laying in bed all that day, still drinking, just trying to numb the pain of that. And, you know, but for me, and the weird thing is they all those things sound like they should be rock bottoms. Do you know what I mean? Breaking 4 ribs, you know, needing hospital treatment and not going, you know, you think you'd lay there and go, probably that was pretty stupid. Probably should have done something about that. Or, you know, getting arrested however many times and being like, probably should do something here, you know. And none of it ever really seemed to make any difference. The thing that actually really, and I said to myself this morning, I wasn't going to tell this story, but actually listing off all the really, really quite bad stuff, you know, police arrests and broken bones and smashed up faces and stuff, all those things that sound like they should be rock bottoms, when actually the thing that really brought me into recovery was I was as I said earlier, living in one room above a pub, and I had a mate who lived upstairs, and he was a chef, and we used to use together and drink together. But he's actually in recovery in London now, and I haven't seen him for ages. But he lent me 50 quid one weekend because I lost a job or something like that. But I was about to get paid, and he said, "Oh, you know, I'm going to see my mum on Monday, take her out for lunch, so I need the money back." I said, yeah, no problem, mate, no problem, that's fine. You know, I'll give you the 50 quid back on Sunday night. Sunday night rolls around, and I went up, I'm obviously in blackout at this point, and I found out all this information later on, but I went up to see him. I gave him 45 quid. He saw me pocket 5 quid, which I knew was for booze the next day. He knew I pocketed it for booze the next day, and he challenged me on it and was just like, look, I need the 50 quid. I've got to get to London. It's going to cost me X, and then I've got to take my mum for lunch. And I was like, oh, but I need it for train fare for tomorrow, you know, complete bullshit fabrication. He challenged me on it. A fight ensued. Anyway, I, as I said, was in blackout, don't really remember it, but I woke up the next morning, on the Monday morning, and it was just that impending sense of doom, as I'm sure a lot of your guests talk about. And it's that waking up and going, oh God, something happened. And I messaged him, and I just sort of said, you know, what happened last night? And I just got 3 little words back, which was just like, you need help. And I was like, oh my God. And what that felt like was like, so Ed was like the last friend I had left in the world. You know, it was the one person that I could borrow money off. There's the one person that I could go and knock on his door and he'd give me a can of beer if I needed it, or, you know, and it was like, I felt in that moment like I just stooped to below, you know, for the sake of 5 quid of jeopardizing a relationship with one person who was still willing to stand by me. And it just felt like that was the moment of kind of morally I'd crossed every single line that I had, and that was the bit. And so from that moment I phoned up local services and was just like, look, you know, how do I refer myself, and so started my recovery journey. So all those big crashing crazy things that you think would be a rock bottom, like jumping off balconies in nightclubs and falling down stairs and things that you know that should be those catalysts for recovery, and actually it was just a falling out with a mate over 5 quid.
See, I love that though, because I think the rock bottom is so subjective, isn't it? What is one person's rock bottom isn't for somebody else. And I think that is a perfect example of that. Is it wasn't getting in trouble with the police, it was just this moral line that you had crossed. So
I've got a mate in Brighton, and he basically talks about the window. So he says, you know, to get into recovery, if you're an addict and you're in active addiction or you're an alcoholic in the throes of alcoholism, to get into recovery, you have windows. and those windows will come along now and again, and it might be that you do something so incredibly stupid that you wind up in hospital with 2 broken legs, or it might be that you just say, you call your mum a horrible name, and that window will appear in front of you, and you've got moments to make that decision about whether you're going to turn your life around or not. And he said, but the rest of the time, those windows are shut, and you don't want to find them. And so it's about embracing those windows when they come about. And I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it, because it's kind of like, you know, for most addicts and alcoholics, we tend to walk through life with just blinkers on. Do you know what I mean? We're completely unaware of everything that's going on around us. We have nothing in our soul apart from where's the next drink coming from? Where's the next drug coming from? Me, all the time. And then suddenly, you know, whatever, the universe will just go, here's a window of opportunity, you know, and it can be a massive crashing rock bottom, which everybody around goes, wow, that was terrible. You know, not surprised you sorted yourself out. Or it can just be something so subtle that you just go, God, I've really, really fucked up. You know?
Yeah. No, I love that. I just want to go back even a bit earlier than that in terms of drug dependency, because I think that moment of recovery is important. But I often like to delve into the time when you realised you was an addict. At what point did you realise that these substances had that physical toll on you? Not just the mental toll, but your body had physically become reliant on it.
Yeah, so I had an on-off love affair with speed for years. Like, I discovered it in my late teens, and that was an addiction that I found that I could really pick up and put down. So I would go through phases of like 3 or 4 months where I'd get really, really into it, feel the physical dependency, but then I could almost detox myself off of it and kind of get back to a kind of normal point, a normal balance point. So for me, like the first time I really experienced that was in my early 20s, and it scared the crap out of me enough that I was just like, right, I'm not touching speed. And I didn't touch it again for about 3 or 4 years. And then when I moved down to Brighton, I got back into it again, and then kind of had a couple of years on that, and then was kind of like, well, I need to stop doing this. So I kind of had this on-off thing with speed, which, you know, this addiction that I could almost turn off and on, which I know is not a lot of people's experience. And it's like those people who are kind of like, oh yeah, I'm a casual smoker, I can have a cigarette when I have, you know, and then I can just put it down and put it out, and it's just like, you're a dick. But it was like, it sounds like that. But yeah, but basically the thing for me, the one that really, really got me, and the one that got me more than anything, was alcohol. And it's the one that surprises, because it's so socially acceptable and it's so hyper normalized in our society that it was like, you know, when I first started waking up with the shakes, I was like, oh, this is a bit weird. Like, I didn't really understand what it was, and of course, you know, I'm not an alcoholic. You know, I'm high functioning. I'm a creative. I work in the music industry. You know, I can't possibly be me. And then it's like, you know, as gradually it's like, you know, the shakes start to happen, and then you start to have the dry heaving in the morning, and then you're like, and then after a while, it's like you're just drinking constantly to kind of fight off the withdrawal, and it's like, oh my God, it's like, yeah, it just suddenly hits you. It's like, and you know, and I would make light of it in ridiculous ways. I'd be like, oh, I'm the village drunk and all this, or I'm, you know, or yeah, and it's just ridiculous rationalization of like, I've got a physical addiction, you know, but trying to rationalize it or laugh it off, and in the back of your head constantly thinking, well, it's all right, I'll just deal with it tomorrow, you know. And that must have gone on for, I suppose, probably from my second year of uni, I realised that. So I'd been 31 and I came into recovery when I was 36. So there was about 5 years of actually knowing that I was alcoholic in addiction. But being too stubborn, stupid, whatever, terrified, scared probably, to be fair, scared of doing anything about it. And probably actually fully believing that this is what's going to kill me. But it's okay because I know what's going to kill me, and it's almost like better the devil you know. And then actually being like, when by the time I was sort of 35, and I just, you know, pains in my liver and my pancreas, and I was like kind of, you know, carrying a lot of alcohol weight, and just being like, oh my God, this is going to kill me, and this is going to be a bloody horrible way to go. So I need to, you know, I need to start thinking about what the hell we do here. And then of course the rock bottoms and everything. Course, so I just find it interesting, because I think when people first start taking drugs, there is this almost acceptance with a drug that you could become physically dependent on it. But you talked about alcohol in society in the way that it is just everywhere, isn't it? The way it's targeted, the way it's marketed. So many people
talk about how alcohol dependency creeps up on them. There isn't just this, because there's no expectancy for that to happen, I think. That could never happen to me, the denial element of it. But yeah, the idea that one day you just wake up and your body is shaking.
Well, this is
You're
it. I mean,
physically dependent on that substance.
Probably from about the age of 18, I drank daily, I would imagine, but not like to excess. So it'd be like 3 or 4 pints on a weekday after work or whatever, and then or 2 or 3 pints after work, and then home and dinner, and and then weekends would smash it unless I was doing a gig, and then it would be a bit more of a party during the week. But I'd never really considered it to be that. Do you know what I mean? I was like, I wasn't sitting at home drinking bottles of vodka or and things like that. And I was talking to my girlfriend about this the other day, actually, and like pound a pint nights and like going out on a Tuesday and with a tenner, and like it was all just perfectly really normal, and then like these sorts of things don't happen now, but it was I guess they do. They have student nights and stuff still.
Still there, I suppose. But it's obviously just the price of things. I remember there was a night pounded, and it was £1 drinks, and it was just you'd go out with a tenner, and you'd be
out with a tenner, and you'd be steaming drunk, and this is it. So I think it. I don't know. I think it does. It just sneaks up on you. It certainly did with me. And I don't know, maybe when I was younger, my body could handle it better. And so therefore, but as I got older, things slowed down, and kind of maybe the addiction kind of really took hold, or maybe I just stopped trying not to be that. I don't know. Yeah.
Now talk to me more about the music then. So what are we doing now in recovery? The record label, the way that you're helping people.
Yeah, so when I got sober, I went back to work in the music industry. I worked for a little while as a booking agent, worked for a Brighton-based agency, and then I went and worked as a DJ agent as well. And really what that kind of showed me for the first time was quite how entrenched the music industry and alcohol and drugs are kind of together. I'd go and work a show, and the bands would be being offered drinks after drinks after drinks, and and everyone would be outside smoking weed, and you'd be like, wow, this is quite nuts, and if you're a musician who doesn't drink or use drugs, or you're a professional in the music industry who has just decided this is not for them, how do you have a meaningful career? How do you have any sort of participation in this? Even if you're just at home playing with your guitar and you want to do an open mic night, they're going to be in your local pub. So it's quite a triggering experience for somebody who's just coming into recovery. So, and as we kind of know through services and through recent things, like Kathy Sloan from Central School is doing amazing work about, creativity and recovery. And the Carol Black report showed that, creativity alongside structured treatment, gives a better chance of long-term recovery. So we kind of, if you're new to recovery and you're trying to embrace this creative element to what you have in your toolbox, how do you have that? So long story short, I back in 2018 decided for whatever weird, wacky, insane reason, I was going to start a record label that worked with musicians in recovery. And so I met 2 or 3 guys down in Brighton who were just what I consider incredible songwriters, and we put out a few singles. And fast forward to today, and we've kind of done 150 tracks worldwide on Spotify. We've done I think 12 albums and something like 20 singles. We've got a track out today from an act called Hannah Piranha called Elixir of Life, and that's beautifully shot video, all full of ballet and then kind of like heavy guitar parts and stuff like that. So we have the record label. We also do a lot of so we've just created a workshop series, so we can do event management training. We also do songwriting and performance training as well, so we kind of offer that up to services as well. And we do a lot of sober event stuff. So last year we were involved in the Recovery Walk down in London. So we curated the main stage at the Rusty Laptop. And then we also did Essex Recovery Festival and Bristol Recovery Festival next year. And we're kind of, plugged into a lot. We work with hundreds of musicians and DJs all over the country. So even if people aren't necessarily on the roster, we kind of, stay close to them, because if there's an opportunity that occurs, that we can give someone a gig or say, come and be a part of this amazing thing that we're doing over here, then we can bring them on board as well.
So obviously we're based up in the northeast here in Hull. You guys been down there in Brighton. How could you work then across the UK?
So we're well up for travel. That's the thing. I mean, that's why I'm here.
Of course, you are, 5 hours on a train.
You know, do you want to travel 200 miles to do a 1 hour podcast? Yes, I will do this thing. Is there lunch provided? No. I mean, we're fully prepared to travel. I mean, the great thing about myself and the rest of the team is we're all musicians and we've all toured extensively. So we're not afraid to travel. So you know, with the workshops, it's myself and my colleague Mishkin, and we will travel and we will deliver the workshops in whatever city, wherever in the country. You know, we're quite happy to do all that stuff. I mean, obviously, there's fees attached, and we have to work out how we pay for things. You know, but certainly, you know, we're quite happy to do that. But ultimately, I mean, the ambition for Not Saints is to grow. You know, is to have regional facilitators that can go and deliver workshops, and you know, we want to have we believe so much in what we do. We want to have a presence pretty much wherever we go. So, you know.
I think it's fantastic. You know, it sounds absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
How are you funded then?
So historically we've been grant funded. So we're not for profit. So everything we do, we essentially set up like a CIC, but we're moving to charitable status hopefully this year. And we get money from the Arts Council, National Lottery, like a lot of sort of creative organisations. But we are hoping to kind of move into a more sustainable model, hopefully through the workshops. So if services like CGL want to, you know, buy in the workshops from us, then it kind of helps us to kind of continue the work we do.
I think it's a great idea though, because I think there's so many people who are creative, who want to be creative. As you said, it's in the Dame Carol Black report and how that can aid recovery for people in structured treatment. But how many organisations out there can deliver what you guys are delivering? Do you know what I mean? Well, it's so niche, which means that you basically could be the go-to for this across the country.
I mean, there's lots of things. I mean, there are recovery choirs, there's recovery drama groups and things like that. But I'm not aware of anybody that kind of really does bespoke contemporary music training. So we can do everything from hip hop to jazz to folk. You know, we can focus on all of those. So we can take a room full of 20 people and go, what's your music of choice? Show us what you like, and we can teach you how to write music in that style. We can teach you how to work with the music that you love. You know, Mishkin's got 25 years as a music teacher. I've been in music 20 years. So we've got a combined experience of like nearly 50 years, given the fact we're both in recovery as well. So we speak the language of recovery. You know, so we're not just music teachers coming in and teaching people. We're people in recovery who have all this experience that we can share with you. So, you know, I think it's
so. I mean,
it's a steal.
Absolutely. I mean, my perception of you know, using a recording studio is probably from, I remember watching Eminem 8 Mile and something happens and the guy says something like this, you know, this room costs like $1,000 per minute or something like that. You know, I've always thought it'd be like ridiculously priced to work in a studio. If we had artists here locally, or if there were artists across the country listening to this that haven't ever recorded any of their music professionally, can you help facilitate that in any way?
Absolutely. So a big part of the workshops that we do is in session 5. We'll actually sit. So we bring a portable studio with us. So we bring a load of rack mounted equipment and a laptop, and we can literally record side by side with the person, and we can show you how to use software to actually record your own music. So we can help you do a demo yourself, but also show you how some really cool little tricks to just kind of get the best, rather than sitting there with your phone and kind of going, oh yeah, I'm going to record it on my phone. It's like we can actually show you some cool little tricks, even how to use your phone as a microphone in that context and stuff.
Because it's so accessible now, isn't it? You know, we talked about the influences of TikTok in music, but almost anybody has the access to be a musician now. It isn't like it used to be back in the day. You know, there's all this self-recording equipment, which is incredible, really, because I think creativity and art should be accessible to everybody.
I mean, that's the great thing about what we do, and you know, within the workshop, I keep talking about this now, but I suppose that's a conversation. But you know, within the workshop, so Mishkin is an incredible pianist. She's been playing for years and grew up playing classical piano and stuff like that. So she would take the very much organic side of things. I can then take someone aside who has no musical talent whatsoever and has like always aspired to write a song, and then we'll just go and use a piece of software, get some beats, get some loops going, and we can start building up a hip hop track, building up a Balearic house track if you want, you know, whatever it is. You know, if you sit down with me and go, I want to make this, we can find the samples, we can build the beats, we can build the loops, you know, and that's how we build a song. We can do songwriting with somebody who's never had any experience. So all the software will do it for you. You literally just need someone like me to sit there and go, this is how you do.
You know? Devil's advocate question here, but do you think you're almost pigeonholing yourself with just focusing on just recovery? like, could you not open this up to everybody, basically? Because it sounds incredible what you're doing, or is that really the niche? Is that what you're doing, is to focus on helping people with lived experience?
I think definitely there's scope for us to open that up. I think that we're so well known in our current kind of wheelhouse, if you like, within recovery circles. I think it would be so obvious for us. It's just obvious for us to stay put right now. If we got to the point where we could kind of open it up across the board and expand in that way, then absolutely, I think we probably could. But for me, I don't like to lose sight of where I came from.
Exactly. I really like that as well. Yeah.
My people.
That's why I asked it. To be fair,
I mean, that's the thing. I think my people are my people. And I know, there are other charities that do stuff around mental health, and there are other, there's homeless record labels and there's prison record labels and things like that. Whereas actually, I think for recovery, we are still so stigmatized, and there's still such lack of awareness. And it's, if someone has a mental health problem, everyone feels sorry for them. If someone has an addiction problem, 90% of people are like,
self-inflicted.
It's self-inflicted. You brought it on yourself, and so it is that thing. And I think it, for us, it's we want to work with our people.
Absolutely. Before I finish, is there anything else you'd like to mention, talk about?
No, I mean, just if anybody's interested in what we do, it's Not Saints, and you can just come and say hi.
Brilliant.
Basically,
we'll put all the links in the description.
Great, yeah.
I've got a series of questions here that I'd like to ask, and I ask all our podcast participants these. If you've listened to any of these episodes before, you might be prepared for them. My first question is, what's your favourite word?
Serendipity.
That's mine.
Marvellous. There we go. Kindred spirits.
What's your least favourite word?
Moist.
Nice. What excites you?
Everything.
What doesn't excite you?
Being bored.
What sound or noise do you love?
Making my son laugh.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Clicking. When someone's got a pen.
What's your favourite curse word?
My favourite curse word?
Yeah.
Can I say it on here?
Yeah, of course you can.
No, I'm not going to drop the C-bomb. It's got to be fuck. It's got to be fuck. Fuck's just versatile. So
what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I beg your pardon?
What profession would you like to attempt? If you wasn't doing music producing, what would you like to do?
Human rights lawyer.
Nice. What profession would you not like to do?
Oh, crikey. Anything at heights. Yeah. Not good at heights.
Have you seen the ones where people climb those really high towers just to change a light bulb?
Yeah, no.
Like they do it one day and they get like 30 grand for the year or something ridiculous.
Fuck
That's amazing.
that,
I know.
really.
I fuck that even for that. And lastly, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Bad start, good finish.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the Believing People podcast.
Much.
You've been wonderful.
That's great. Thank you very much for having me.
And if you've enjoyed this episode of the Believing People podcast, we'd love for you to share it with others who might find it meaningful. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and leaving a review will help us reach more people and continue challenging stigma around addiction and recovery. For additional resources, insights and updates, explore the links in this episode description. And to learn more about our mission and hear more incredible stories, you can visit us directly at believingpeoplepodcast.com. Podcast.com. Podcast.com. Podcast.com.